The skies above Valenth Prime burned crimson. Smoke and plasma fire turned the horizon into a storm of color, a mix of death and light. What had once been a shining alien city, crystal spires that shimmered like glass trees, was now a wasteland of molten ruin. Every few seconds, another plasma round screamed down from orbit, shaking the ground with a thunder that rolled like the wrath of gods. Lieutenant Ethan Cole crouched behind a shattered wall, wiping soot and blood from his visor. His exosuit was old, patched together from 3 different models, but it still hummed when he needed it. Around him, the remnants of his squad moved like ghosts, silent, focused, exhausted. They were the last of Bravo Company, ordered to evacuate civilians before the Drex Dominion wiped the city clean. "Command, this is Cole," he said into his comm. "We've got Valari civilians pinned in the East Quarter. We need pickup, now." Static answered, followed by a distant voice. "Negative, Lieutenant. Airspace is compromised. You're on your own. Prioritize evac on foot. Good luck." Ethan stared at the comm for a long second, then exhaled. He was used to being on his own. Humans were the smallest faction in this war, a handful of colonies scattered across alien empires that barely remembered their names. The Drex didn't fear them, the Valari pitied them. And yet somehow, humans always found themselves on the front lines. "All right, you heard command," Ethan called to his squad. "We move now. Civilians first, ammo last." Sergeant Leon, his second-in-command, nodded grimly. "You think anyone's left in there, sir?" Ethan looked toward the plaza. The Valari shelters were half collapsed, their crystalline walls still glowing faintly with blue energy. Through the dust he could see faint movement, small figures huddling together. "They're alive," he said. "Let's keep it that way." They advanced through the wreckage, plasma bolts slicing the air around them. The Drex soldiers were relentless. Massive reptilian warriors in powered armor that gleamed dark green in the firelight. They moved like tanks, each carrying weapons meant to tear through starship hulls. Against them, humans were fragile. But humans were also unpredictable. And Ethan Cole was very good at being unpredictable. He darted between ruins, motioning for his squad to cover the flanks. When a Drex patrol turned the corner, he didn't hesitate. He tossed a pulse grenade, ducked behind debris, and counted the beats. 3, 2, 1. The blast erupted in a shimmer of blue, dropping the patrol in a cloud of static and light. "Go!" Ethan shouted, sprinting forward. They reached the shelter entrance, a jagged crack in the side of a collapsed building. Inside, it was dim and eerily quiet. Valari civilians huddled together, tall, slender beings with translucent skin that refracted the dim light like gemstones. Their eyes glowed softly, their faces unreadable, but their fear was unmistakable. Among them were elders and children, the youngest barely waist-high. Ethan slung his rifle across his back and knelt beside one of the children. The small alien stared at him with wide, glimmering eyes. "It's all right," he said, keeping his voice calm. "We're here to help you get out. Follow my men, stay low, and don't stop running." The translator built into his armor repeated his words in soft, chiming Valari speech. The elders nodded gratefully. The child, Tira, one of them whispered, clutched a small crystal pendant and stared at Ethan as though she couldn't decide if he was real. Outside, another explosion rocked the street. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Leon's voice came through the comm. "Sir, enemy reinforcements inbound from the west, at least 2 Drex squads." "Understood," Ethan replied. "Evac line is eastbound, move the civilians now, I'll hold them off." Leon hesitated. "You'll be cut off." "I'll improvise," Ethan said, forcing a grin. "You know I love that." Leon didn't argue, she just salute. Then began herding the Valari out through the far exit. The sound of plasma fire grew louder, closer. Ethan switched to manual override on his armor, boosting the power to his shields. His rifle hummed in his hands as he crouched by the doorway, waiting. The Drex came like thunder. The first burst of plasma tore through the wall inches from his head. Ethan returned fire, ducking behind cover as the air sizzled. His HUD lit up with warnings, shield integrity dropping, ammunition low. He knew this was a losing fight, but every second he held them here was another second the civilians could escape. He shot one Drex square in the chest, the blast staggering the creature. Another vaulted over the rubble, roaring. Ethan fired again, hitting it in the throat. But there were too many. He started falling back step by step, through the ruined corridor. He could hear the screams of civilians in the distance, the echo of panic fading into the wind. And then, through the smoke, he saw her. Tira stood frozen in the middle of the street, her pendant glowing softly in her hands. The others had made it across the plaza, but she had dropped something, a keepsake maybe, and gone back for it. She was staring at it when the sky flashed white. A Drex gunship hovered above, charging its main plasma cannon. Ethan didn't think. There was no time to think. He sprinted. His armor screamed warnings. The targeting lasers swept across the rubble, locking onto the child. Ethan dove forward, throwing himself between her and the gunship just as the cannon fired. The world exploded. A storm of white fire engulfed him. The blast hit his back with the force of a collapsing sun. He felt the heat tear through his armor, through his flesh, through everything. For a moment there was no pain, only light, the kind of light that burned right through memory. He dimly heard someone screaming. Maybe it was the girl. Maybe it was him. He fell forward, wrapping his arms around the small, trembling form of Tira, pulling her close as the shockwave ripped through the street. He could feel his armor melting, his body breaking. But still, he held her. Human reflex. Human instinct. Protect. The light faded. The air filled with ash and silence. Ethan's vision blurred. The gunship was gone, replaced by drifting embers. Around him, debris floated lazily through the air. His armor was cracked open, the systems dead. But the child in his arms was alive. Shaking, crying, but alive. He tried to speak, but blood filled his throat. He coughed and smiled weakly at her. "Told you, stay low." She looked at him, her crystalline tears falling on his face, glowing faintly. She touched his chest, whispering something in Valor. A prayer, maybe, or a name. He didn't understand the words, but they carried warmth, like a gentle pulse of light sinking into him. His vision flickered. He felt something stir beneath him, the ground humming softly, like a heartbeat. The air shimmered. For a brief, impossible moment he thought he saw shapes moving in the light. Metal tendrils flowing like liquid crawling toward him, then darkness took him. When the light returned, it was cold. He wasn't breathing. He wasn't sure he could, but he could feel something, metal, alive and pulsing, wrapping around his skin like liquid armor. A whisper echoed in his mind, calm and resonant, not in any language he knew. Designation human, status worthy. Then silence again. Ethan Cole, the man who shielded a child from a plasma blast, was no longer just human. He was becoming something else. Ethan Cole woke to the sound of whispers that weren't really sounds at all. They thrummed inside his skull, like the vibration of deep metal, or the distant hum of a reactor under his skin. Every sense came back in fragments. Smell of ozone, taste of copper, the faint shimmer of blue light through his closed eyelids. He tried to move, but his body didn't feel like his own. There was a weight, not heavy X. Actly, but present, like a second skin pressing against every nerve. "Vitals, stabilizing," said a voice somewhere nearby, distant, distorted. "Specimen is still alive. Containment field at 60%. Ethan opened his eyes. He was lying on a slab of polished metal inside a vast chamber of alien design. The walls glowed with flowing circuits that pulsed with light, alive and rhythmic. Strange figures moved around him, Drex scientists in long armored coats, their scales reflecting the light like oil. Above him hung a web of machines, scanning beams crawling over his body. He tried to sit up. The Drex closest to him flinched back. "Restrain him!" one shouted, raising a control gauntlet. A field of shimmering energy formed around the slab, pressing him down. Ethan clenched his fists, and something answered inside him. The air rippled, the containment field flickered, then shattered with a sharp, crystalline sound. The Drex froze. Ethan looked down at himself. His armor, the old battered human combat suit, was gone. In its place was something else, something that glowed faintly with molten light beneath smooth, dark plating. The metal pulsed with his heartbeat. He raised his hand, and the armor shifted with him, forming subtle grooves and glowing veins of blue. "What the hell?" he whispered. His voice sounded strange, like two voices speaking at once, his and another, deeper, echoing through the air. The Drex commander stepped forward, his scaled face pulled tight with awe and greed. "It responded to him," he muttered. "It bonded. After all these cycles, the Aegis finally awakens and chooses a human." Ethan's head snapped toward him. "Where am I?" The commander smirked. "You're in Dominion custody, Terran. Consider yourself honored. You are the first living being to wear the armor of the ancients." Ethan's mind reeled. "Armor?" The Drex gestured toward the web of machinery. "The Aegis construct, a relic older than any empire. It was buried beneath the ruins of Valor Prime. We've searched for decades to find it." His eyes narrowed. "And now it's bound to you." Ethan tried to stand, but the armor reacted before he could. The plating along his legs adjusted, small vents opening, releasing faint hisses of light. He felt stronger, balanced, as if the armor anticipated his every move. One of the Drex raised a weapon. "Sir, it's unstable." The commander silenced him with a glare. "No sudden moves. The suit is symbiotic. If it perceives threat, it will defend itself." As if in response, the armor's light brightened slightly. Ethan could feel it listening, not to their words, but to his pulse, his fear, his instinct. He took a step forward. The floor rippled faintly beneath him, as though gravity itself bent around his movement. The Drex backed away. The commander held up his gauntlet. "Do not resist, human. We can separate you from it, safely." Something cold pulsed in Ethan's chest. He remembered fire, the child's terrified eyes, the heat of the plasma blast. He remembered dying. And yet, here he was. He looked at his hands again. The armor's surface shimmered, forming shifting lines that seemed to react to his thoughts. "It saved me," he realized. "It kept me alive." The armor whispered in his mind again, calm and mechanical, yet somehow alive. "Do not fear. You are compatible. Neural sync, stable, directive, protect." Ethan's breath caught. Protect who? No answer, only that hum, deep and steady. The Drex commander approached cautiously, eyes shining with greed. "We will take the armor from you, human. It is too valuable to waste. Stand down." Ethan's instincts flared. He didn't fully understand what this suit was, but something deep inside told him. These weren't scientists. They were dissecting him. He could see the tools nearby. Plasma scalpels, containment pods, cables dripping with biofluid. He'd been nothing but an experiment. "Not happening," Ethan said quietly. The Drex commander scowled. "Restrain him." Ethan felt the surge before he saw it. The armor reacted instantly. Liquid metal spreading across his body in a flash of blue fire. The restraints on the table shattered. Energy arced across the room, sending the nearest Drex flying into the wall. The air thickened, vibrating with power. The Drex opened fire. Bolts of plasma slammed into him, but the armor absorbed, them light flaring where they hit before dissolving into nothing. Ethan raised his arm by instinct, and the armor reshaped, forming a glowing shield that caught the next volley. He moved without thinking. The armor moved with him, guiding his limbs, turning every reflex into precision. He swung once, and an energy pulse blasted outward, throwing the Drex across the lab like rag dolls. Silence followed, broken only by the hum of the armor. Ethan stood in the middle of the devastation, chest heaving. The armor retracted slightly, cooling, plates shifting back into smoother form. What are you?" One Drex scientist gasped from the floor. Ethan didn't know. He only knew that whatever this was, it wasn't just technology. It felt alive. He turned toward the exit, but the lab doors sealed shut with heavy locks. Alarms blared. From somewhere above, automated turrets descended from the ceiling. The armor's voice spoke again in his mind, calm, clinical, but carrying faint undertones of something older. Multiple threats detected. Combat assistance protocol ready. Shall I engage? Ethan hesitated. Do it. The room filled with light. The armor moved like a living storm, deflecting plasma, leaping through the air, tearing through automated defenses with energy blades that formed from his wrists. Each strike was effortless, guided by something beyond him. When it was over, smoke filled the room, and the floor glowed with heat. The voice inside him dimmed again. Threats neutralized, heart rate elevated, recommending rest. Ethan staggered against the wall, catching his breath. You're some kind of AI. Negative. I am Aegis. I am protection. You are pilot. He looked down at his reflection in the broken glass floor. A figure wrapped in living metal, eyes glowing faintly from the visor. For the first time in his life, he felt both powerful and utterly terrified. Then a small sound broke through the static. A faint, high-pitched tone, almost like a chime. Ethan turned. Across the room, a side hatch slid open. A young Valari child stepped inside, her luminous skin dimmed by soot and fear. "Tira," Ethan whispered. Her eyes widened as she saw him, the human who had saved her, now reborn as something half machine, half legend. She took a hesitant step forward, voice trembling. "Ethan?" He took off his helmet, the armor shifting back smoothly from his face. "Yeah," he said, smiling weakly. "It's me." She ran to him and hugged his leg, small hands trembling. "They said you were gone. They said you were dead." "Guess not." He looked down at her, then at the devastation around them. "Come on, we're getting out of here." As he lifted her into his arms, the armor pulsed again, this time not in defense but in recognition. The blue light along its surface brightened, as if it understood why he fought. "Directive confirmed," the voice whispered in his mind. "Protect the innocent." He looked toward the sealed door. The armor's plates shifted, forming lines of energy along his arm. With a single blow, he struck the door, and it crumpled like paper. Outside lay a ruined corridor leading deeper into the Dominion facility. Somewhere above, alarms screamed and soldiers converged. But Ethan felt something new. Certainty. Whatever this armor was, it had chosen him for a reason, and if the Drex wanted it back, they'd have to go through hell to get it. He adjusted his grip on Tira and stepped into the firelit corridor. "All right, kid," he muttered. "Let's go save a world." The facility shook with distant explosions, somewhere above. Alarms howled in the Drex guttural language, echoing down the corridors like war drums. Ethan Cole moved through the smoke with Tira in his arms, the armor adapting to every motion. Each step made the floor hum faintly beneath his boots, a resonance that felt like the planet itself was reacting to him. He glanced down at Tira. The small Valari girl clung to his chest, eyes wide but silent. She had stopped trembling. Maybe because she felt safe. Maybe because the armor emitted a low, comforting vibration that seemed to calm everything around it. "Hang on, kid," Ethan murmured. "We'll get you out of this metal tomb." The armor's voice answered softly in his head. "External layout mapped, structural weaknesses located, guidance available." Ethan smirked. "You can talk more than I expected. You got a name?" "Aegis." "Right, the Drex mentioned that. You got an off switch, Aegis." "Deactivation would result in pilot death." Ethan blinked. "Okay, let's not do that then." He moved through the dim corridors, guided by the glowing trail that appeared in his visor. The armor projected pathways and heat signatures ahead, highlighting Drex soldiers in red outlines through walls. It wasn't just armor, it was awareness. When the first patrol appeared, Ethan pressed Tira behind a bulkhead. 3 Drex soldiers advanced cautiously, weapons raised. He could see the fear in their movements. They had heard the stories already. Ethan raised his hand, and the armor responded instantly. A faint glow pulsing from his palm. The air rippled, and energy condensed into a shimmering projectile. He flicked his wrist, and the blast hurled forward, striking the first Drex squarely in the chest. The creature was thrown 10 meters back, armor cracking like glass. The others opened fire, but the Aegis shifted again. Plates along Ethan's arm unfolded into a barrier of interlocking light. Plasma bolts splashed harmlessly against it. He sprinted forward, every motion faster than human reflex, guided by something deeper. A connection between mind and metal. He struck once, twice, 3 times. Each hit a blur of blue light and kinetic force. When it was over, the corridor was silent again. Tira peeked from behind the wall, eyes wide with awe. "You fight like the old Guardians," she whispered. Ethan looked down at his glowing hands. "Guardians?" Valor told stories. Of beings who came from the stars long ago, wearing living metal that defended whole worlds. But they were myths. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Yeah, well, looks like your myths have a sense of humor." As they moved deeper into the complex, the armor continued to guide him, showing alternate routes, locking doors behind them, suppressing sensors. Ethan realized it wasn't just reactive, it understood tactics. It learned from him, mirrored his instincts. He stopped beside a large observation window overlooking the planet below. The Dominion facility was built into the side of a canyon, a fortress of black steel and lightning storms. Beyond it stretched the barren deserts of Valanth Prime, scarred by bombardment. "How do we get out of here, Aegis?" "External hangar bay to the east. Atmospheric transports available. Estimated survival probability 41%. 41, you're a real optimist. Correction, 43 accounting for your unpredictability." Ethan almost laughed. "You're learning fast." They turned into a wider chamber, a command room filled with holographic displays and terrified Drex officers. The moment they saw him, chaos erupted. Orders were shouted, alarms screamed louder, and heavy turrets descended from the ceiling. Ethan placed Tira behind a console. "Stay down." "Engage?" Aegis asked. "Engage." The armor unfolded. Energy flowed like liquid fire across Ethan's body, his silhouette becoming a blur of light and metal. He launched forward as the turrets opened fire. Plasma streaks carved through the air, but the armor absorbed them, converting heat into kinetic bursts that fueled his movements. He leapt onto the central platform, slammed his fist into the floor, and a shockwave rippled outward, toppling Drex soldiers like leaves in a storm. The armor spoke again, voice calm even amid chaos. "Energy reserves stable. Hostile presence minimal. Suggest rapid extraction." Ethan panted, surveying the room. The Drex who still lived were crawling away in terror. He saw in their eyes something he'd never seen before. Not hatred, not even rage, fear. One of them, a technician, croaked out words in broken human speech. You are cursed machine. The armor kills those unworthy. It should have consumed you." Ethan stared at him. Guess it changed its mind. He turned and walked toward the eastern corridor. Behind him, flames licked the shattered consoles and the facility's main power grid began to fail. Red emergency lights bathed everything in blood-colored glow. As he reached the hangar, the massive blast doors began to close. Drex mechs, towering bipedal war machines, stomped into position, blocking the escape route. Aegis pulsed inside his thoughts. "Heavy artillery detected. Recommend evasive strategy." Ethan grimaced. "No time for subtlety." He set Tira down behind a crate. "Stay here. No matter what happens, you don't move." The mechs opened fire, a barrage of plasma and missiles that turned the hangar into a furnace. Ethan charged straight into it. The armor flared with golden light as the impacts struck, each one absorbed and redirected. He felt heat wash through him, but instead of burning, it fueled him. The armor converting destruction into motion. He leapt, landing atop the first mech, drove his hand through its cockpit, and ripped out its energy core. The explosion propelled him through the air, and he slammed into the next one, tearing it apart with energy blades that extended from his forearms. Every strike was brutal and perfect, guided by something that wasn't rage, but focus. The armor understood the rhythm of combat. It fought like it had done this for millennia. When the last mech fell, Ethan stood panting in the silence, surrounded by wreckage and glowing debris. The hangar doors began to open, Aegis overriding the controls with a flicker of blue across the consoles. A sandstorm howled outside, the horizon glowing faintly under the pale twin moons. Tira ran up to him, clutching his hand. "You're bleeding." He looked down. There was a gash on his arm. The armor hadn't covered everything. The wound was shallow, but the blood sizzled as it touched the metal. The armor pulsed and the wound sealed itself instantly, skin knitting beneath a flash of light. Ethan blinked. "That's new." "Symbiotic repair protocol active," Aegis said. "You and I share biostructure now. Damage to one affects both. So if you die, we die." Comforting. He led Tira toward one of the smaller transports, sleek and silver, Valari design, likely stolen by the Drex. The armor's light dimmed slightly as they entered, almost as if it relaxed. As the engines roared to life, Ethan took one last look at the burning facility below. "Aegis," he said quietly, "why me? There had to be thousands before me who touched this thing." There was a pause, a long, heavy silence that seemed to reach through time itself. "The Aegis does not choose by species," it finally said. "It chooses by instinct. You acted without calculation. You shielded another with no expectation of survival. That act is rare in any galaxy." Ethan stared out the viewport, the desert stretching endlessly below. "So you picked me because I was stupid? Because you were human?" The words echoed in his mind long after they'd cleared the canyon. They flew through the night until the stars emerged again, bright and clean above the storms. Ethan piloted with one hand, the armor seamlessly interfacing with the ship. It knew every system, every control. Tira had fallen as. Leap in the co-pilot's seat, the faint glow of her skin reflecting off the glass. She looked peaceful now, a child who had seen the end of a world and somehow found safety in the arms of a creature who wasn't entirely human anymore. Ethan leaned back, letting the silence fill the cabin. For the first time since the blast, he allowed himself to breathe. The armor's light pulsed gently, as if mirroring his heartbeat. "Destination?" it asked. "Somewhere we can hide," he murmured. "Somewhere to figure out what the hell you and I have become." "Acknowledged. But understand this, Ethan Cole. Others will come. They will seek to claim the Aegis, or destroy it. None must succeed." He looked out at the stars. "Then they'll have to go through both of us." The ship soared higher, leaving the burning planet behind. For now there was calm, but deep within the armor something ancient stirred, sensing that its awakening had not gone unnoticed. In the dark corners of the galaxy, forces began to move, and all of them whispered one name, the Iron Ghost. Weeks passed since the escape from the Dominion facility. Ethan Cole and Tira had crossed canyons, dead cities, and endless sand before finding shelter in the ruins of an old Valari temple hidden beneath the cliffs of Rin Vallis, a place where even the Drex scanners couldn't reach. The temple's walls shimmered faintly with living crystal, its architecture grown rather than built. It pulsed softly at night, breathing with the rhythm of the planet. It felt alive, the same way the armor did, old, aware, and patient. Inside those walls, Ethan began to understand what he had become. The Aegis was no mere weapon. It was a relic from a civilization so ancient that even the Valari called them the Star Forgers. The armor was one of their last creations, a guardian designed not for conquest but for protection. It responded to intent, feeding on purpose. The stronger the will to defend, the stronger it became. Ethan trained in the temple's great hall, surrounded by shattered statues and quiet blue light. With every day, the connection deepened. He could feel the armor anticipate his thoughts, shifting plates before he moved, amplifying strength, heightening senses. It didn't just follow commands, it understood them before he spoke. Tira often watched from the sidelines, sketching with bits of charcoal on old stone tablets. She was growing fast, both in body and in courage. Sometimes, when she touched the temple walls, they responded, glowing faintly, resonating with her voice. The Valari had always been connected to living crystal, and Tira, it seemed, had inherited that bond strongly. One evening, as Ethan ran combat drills, she spoke softly, "The temple remembers you." He stopped mid-motion, sweat dripping from his brow. "Me?" she nodded. "It reacts when you walk near the heart chamber, like it recognizes the armor you wear." Ethan looked down at the faintly glowing veins of light tracing his chest. "Maybe we're standing on something built by the same people who made this." Tira hesitated, then asked, "Do you trust it, the armor?" He thought about that for a long moment. The Aegis had saved his life, guided him, fought beside him. But it had also changed him. His blood tests were no longer fully human. His heartbeat sometimes echoed through metal. And when he looked in the mirror, his eyes shimmered faintly with the same blue as the armor's core. "I don't know," he admitted. "But it trusts me. That'll have to be enough." Their peace didn't last. By the second month, the Drex Dominion had begun scouring Valanth Prime, hunting for the human ghost wrapped in light. Rumors spread across outposts and comms channels of a being who could destroy tanks with his bare hands, of a protector who appeared from nowhere to save civilians from burning cities. To the Drex, he was an abomination. To the refugees, he was a legend. When the first group of survivors found the temple, battered humans, wounded Valari, and even deserters from alien armies, Ethan almost turned them away. He wasn't looking to lead anyone, but Tira stepped forward before he could speak. "They came because they have nowhere else," she said softly, "and because they believe you can protect them." Ethan looked at their faces, hollow eyes, trembling hands, children clutching bits of scavenged gear. He sighed. "All right," he said. "Then let's make this place worth the walk." Over the next weeks, the temple became something new, a hidden base for the lost. The Aegis interfaced with the ancient technology buried beneath it, powering lights, purifiers, and shields. Under Ethan's direction, they built defenses, repaired ships, and trained together. The humans called him Commander. The Valari called him the Iron Ghost, because he came from death, wrapped in the spirit of metal. He didn't like the name, but it spread faster than he could stop it. Late one night, as a storm raged outside, Ethan stood alone before the heart of the temple, a vast crystalline core that pulsed like a sleeping star. The Aegis vibrated faintly against his skin, resonating with the core's rhythm. "You seek purpose," the armor whispered. "I already have one," Ethan muttered. "Protect them, that's enough. Protection requires unity. The Drex will return in greater force. Alone, you will fail." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You think I don't know that? Then lead them. The armor amplifies will. Let yours become theirs." He didn't answer right away. He'd never wanted to lead. He was a soldier, not a symbol. But when he thought of Tira, the refugees, and the frightened faces that looked to him for hope, something settled in his chest. The same feeling that had driven him to shield a child from a plasma blast. He placed his hand on the glowing crystal. "Then teach me." "Very well," the armor replied. "But understand, leadership is not command, it is sacrifice." The months that followed turned legend into movement. Ethan's small band grew into a force. Not of soldiers, but of survivors. Valari engineers restored drones to patrol the skies. Human technicians rewired Dominion tech into traps and shield arrays. Even a few rebel Drex, disgusted by their empire's cruelty, joined under Ethan's banner. Together, they became known across the wastelands as the Covenant of the Shard, a loose alliance sworn to protect the weak and defy the Dominion. And at its heart stood the Iron Ghost, his armor gleaming like a star in the dark. The Aegis evolved with him. It grew stronger, its systems adapting to new threats. Ethan learned to channel its energy not only for combat but for creation, forging barriers to shield cities, restoring broken machines with a touch. Every time he fought, the armor fed on his intent, amplifying it. The more selfless his actions, the more powerful it became. It was as though the Aegis itself drew strength not from aggression but from compassion. And yet, each victory came at a cost. The armor began to whisper more often, its voice carrying a weight that wasn't entirely mechanical anymore. It spoke of things Ethan couldn't fully understand: ancient wars, forgotten creators, the burden of guardianship across eons. Sometimes, when he looked into the mirror, like surface of the armor, he saw flashes, towering beings of light standing on worlds that no longer existed. The Aegis had seen civilizations rise and fall. It had witnessed extinction, and now it had chosen him. One night Tira came running into the command chamber, her pendant glowing fiercely. "Ethan," she said, breathless. "Dominion ships, a whole fleet, entering orbit." He rose slowly from his seat. The armor flared awake, its light pulsing like a heartbeat. "How long?" "An hour, maybe less. They're deploying ground forces, thousands of them." Ethan stared at the holographic map. Red dots bloomed across the planet's surface. "They found us. The warlord as himself," Aegis whispered. "Varex of the Dominion, the one who seeks to claim me." Ethan's voice hardened. "Then he'll get his wish. He'll meet the Aegis, up close." Tira looked up at him, eyes full of both fear and faith. "You can't fight them all," he smiled faintly. "I don't plan to, but I can make them regret coming here." He stepped out into the night, wind whipping dust across the canyon. The refugees watched in silence as the Iron Ghost walked to the edge of the cliffs, his armor glowing brighter with every step. The Aegis spoke one last time, its tone almost proud. "Are you ready to become more than human?" Ethan's eyes reflected the twin moons. "No," he said softly, "just human enough." He raised his hand toward the sky. The armor's light expanded outward, rippling through the canyon. All across the temple, systems awoke, shields ignited, drones lifted off, energy lines glowed beneath the sand. The Covenant of the Shard prepared for war. High above, in orbit, Commander Varick stared down at the glowing canyon from his flagship. "Begin descent," he growled. "Bring me the human, alive if possible. I want to see the armor kneel before its rightful master." But far below, the Iron Ghost stood waiting, calm, unshaken, the storm's heart in human form. The final battle was coming, and this time, Ethan wasn't fighting to survive. He was fighting to prove that humanity's courage could still rewrite the fate of galaxies. The dawn over Rin Vallis burned crimson. The horizon shimmered with plasma fire and streaking landing craft descending like spears from the heavens. The Drex Dominion's fleet filled the sky, dark silhouettes blotting out the sun. The refugees of the Covenant watched from the cliffs, fear and determination battling in their eyes. Children clutched each other's hands. The older ones armed themselves with scavenged rifles. The Valari stood beside humans and Drex defectors alike, an impossible alliance forged under fire. And at the center of it all stood Ethan Cole, encased in the living armor of the Aegis, its blue light pulsing like a heartbeat against the storm clouds. He looked down the valley, where thousands of Drex soldiers poured from their dropships, metallic beasts and hover tanks roaring across the sand. He didn't feel fear, only purpose. The Aegis whispered in his mind, calm and resonant. "This is the fulcrum, Ethan Cole. What happens here decides whether light endures or is extinguished." "Then let's make sure light wins," he replied, his voice steady. "You cannot face this alone. I won't be alone." He looked back at Tira. She wore armor scavenged from Valari ruins, her pendant glowing bright as a star. Around her, a dozen warriors, human and alien alike, stood ready. She met his gaze and nodded once. "We're with you," she said simply. Ethan smiled faintly beneath the helmet. "Then let's show them what a promise means." The first wave hit like thunder. Plasma bolts streaked across the valley, detonating against the temple's shields. Energy barriers rippled and flared as the Covenant's defenses lit up, firing railguns and kinetic slugs into the descending horde. Ethan charged straight into the chaos. The Aegis responded instantly, armor plates shifting, weapons forming from the nanofabric like living extensions of his will. Twin energy blades flared from his wrists, cutting through Drex mechs as if they were made of paper. Each movement was a blur, fluid, instinctive, unstoppable. He leapt through explosions, carving through soldiers and drones, the armor's voice guiding him like a second heartbeat. Every time a blast came close, the Aegis flared outward, forming shields that bent light and plasma alike. Behind him, the Covenant fought as one. Tira's voice echoed through comms, coordinating defenses, rerouting power. calling artillery strikes with uncanny precision. She had grown into a commander in her own right. For hours the battle raged. Then the Sky SP lit open. A single, massive dropship descended, black as midnight, wreathed in energy. Its hull bore the mark of the Dominion's supreme commander. Varex had arrived. He landed amid the carnage, towering over his soldiers in obsidian armor that pulsed with crimson veins. His eyes glowed like twin suns of rage. "So," Varex boomed through the battlefield comms, his voice echoing across the valley. "You are the human who wears the Forger's relic." Ethan stepped forward through the smoke. "And you're the monster who burns worlds." Varex's grin revealed serrated teeth. The Aegis was meant for conquerors, not weak flesh and sentiment. "Kneel and I might let your people die quickly." Ethan's armor flared, blue against red. "Funny," he said quietly. "That's what the last tyrant told us on Earth. He's gone now, too." Varex roared and launched himself forward, his plasma halberd slicing through the air. The ground trembled as their weapons clashed. Blue and red light collided, shockwaves shattering rock and scattering troops like leaves in a hurricane. Every blow from Varex was powerful enough to level tanks, but the Aegis absorbed the force, channeling energy through Ethan's veins. Ethan countered, striking faster than sight. Each swing guided not by anger but by resolve. The Aegis's energy flared brighter, responding to his will to protect. "He cannot be defeated by strength alone," the Aegis warned. "His armor draws from the Dominion's entire fleet, a hive system." "Then cut the hive." Ethan focused, extending his hand. The Aegis pulsed, sending a surge through the battlefield, hijacking frequencies, disrupting Dominion channels. For a moment Varex's armor flickered. Ethan moved. He struck Varex's chest plate, cracking it open. Sparks and plasma erupted as the Drex warlord staggered backward, roaring in disbelief. "You are nothing," Varex howled, "a dying species pretending at glory." Ethan advanced, his armor blazing like a star. "You're wrong," he said softly. "I'm what happens when a dying species decides to stand back up." He drove his blade into Varex's chest. The warlord screamed, his body convulsing as his armor's red light guttered out. He fell to his knees, clutching the wound. Disbelief etched across his monstrous face. Ethan's hand trembled. The Aegis whispered, "It is done." But Varex's final act came like a knife from the dark. With his dying strength, he triggered a detonator on his wrist. The Dominion fleet began to fall from orbit, not in retreat but in sacrifice. The ships were crashing intentionally, turning into flaming meteors aimed straight for the surface. Thousands of lives, human and alien alike, were about to be erased. Ethan looked up, horror dawning in his eyes. "No. You cannot stop them all," the Aegis said. Unless what? Full neural merge. You will not survive as you are." Tira's voice came through. Comms panicked. "Ethan, the ships, they're coming down. What are you doing?" He didn't answer. He just looked toward the temple, toward the people he'd sworn to protect. Then he whispered, "Do it." The world exploded into light. The Aegis surged outward, its plates splitting, liquefying, merging into his very flesh. Ethan screamed as blue fire poured through his veins, his mind fusing with the armor's consciousness. He felt his heartbeat sync with the temple's core, the planet itself resonating with his pulse. He rose from the ground, no longer entirely human, a being of metal and light surrounded by a storm of energy. Across the valley, the Covenant stopped fighting and stared upward in awe. Ethan extended both hands toward the sky. The Aegis amplified his will, projecting immense fields of energy that reached into the upper atmosphere. One by one, the descending Dominion ships slowed, halted, and disintegrated, their plasma cores dissolving into harmless streaks of light. The ground shook with the force of it. Lightning arced between clouds. The entire valley glowed blue. When the last fireball faded, silence fell. Then the armor's voice spoke for the final time. "Ethan Cole, your will is complete. You gave purpose to the Forger's gift. You turned power into protection. Your essence will endure." Ethan's voice was faint, distant. "Make sure they live. That's all that matters." The Aegis's glow intensified until it was blinding. Then, in an instant, it vanished. collapsing into a sphere of pure light that soared into the sky and disappeared among the stars. Days later, the survivors gathered before the temple's heart. At its center floated a fragment of blue crystal, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Tira stood before it, her hand resting on the glowing surface. She smiled through tears.
"He kept his promise," she whispered. "He always does."
The armor never returned, but its energy lingered, powering the shields, the valley, the rebuilding of their world. The Covenant grew into something greater, not an army, but a civilization built on unity. Humans and Valari together forged a new alliance, one that spread across the stars, and in time they built statues of the man in shining armor who had once shielded a child, and in doing so, changed the destiny of worlds. They called him Ethan Cole, the Iron Ghost, a legend, a protector, and somewhere in the silent void, the Aegis drifted among the stars, waiting, watching, whispering softly in the darkness. The Guardian sleeps, but humanity endures.